Hey everybody, welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I have no fancy name for myself today. My name is Mr. Parsons.
And I'm Andrew Graziano.
And welcome to Open Door Philosophy. This is episode 96, which is our final episode.
Uh-oh.
But before we get to that, you know what's going to happen, everyone. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know if we'll have our regularly scheduled checked weather updates, but everything's going good here. I am in my second semester of law school right now, and it's a lot of fun. Not as fun as philosophizing, but there's a little bit of philosophy in criminal law, which is pretty interesting to see. We're talking about utilitarianism and good stuff, so that's fun to see in class again. But that's the most exciting thing in my life. How's it going for you?
It's going great. You know, we got through, it snowed in Houston, and that was remarkable.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I guess that was like 2 weeks ago or so, a week and a half ago. The weather's warming up now. You've reached peak adulthood when you're excited about a new lawnmower. And I bought a new lawnmower. It's one of those battery ones. It's one of those cordless ones.
Wow.
So it cost a pretty penny. So yeah. I'm excited to use it though. So that's what I'm going to do today. But everything's good. We just finished meta ethics with my year 1 students, and right in the middle of Dao De Jing with my year 2 students. So that's what's going on.
What is meta ethics for? We haven't covered that on the show. So can you give us a little
remarkably? Yeah, meta ethics. Meta ethics is the study of ethics itself, which is really so pretentious sounding. But anyway, yeah, it's questions of like origins of ethics, authority. What do we mean by certain phrases that we say? It's kind of a little bit of philosophy of language in there. Meaningful statements, meaningful propositions. But yeah, a lot of it is also, is morality and ethics evident in the world? Is it something we can observe? Is it something we can even quantify? Or, is it all just cultural? It's cultural dependent. Subjectivism, is it what role does emotions play in determining what's morally right and wrong? So yeah, it's not about like determining what the right action is to take. It's about the origins of it itself. But anyway.
How did your students receive that? Because I was never a big fan of meta ethics, but I know there's a few people that are. So what was the reception?
Yeah, this is the 3rd time I've taught it.
Oh wow.
I think, and I spent too much time on it this year, and now I'm kind of behind. But I think it was okay. Like, I think this was the first year I did a good enough job of it that students caught on to it and enjoyed it. But I think that was because I spent so much time on it. Like, it takes a while to kind of wrap your head around it. It's not at all talking about like, virtue, courage is good, whatever. It's more abstract than that. And yeah, the first year I taught it, oh my gosh, that was a mess. This is the first year I taught it at the beginning. Usually I taught it as the last part of
interesting,
the unit. So at the end, I'll ask the students what they thought about that particular order. But anyway, yeah, it's been a good time.
The question I think on everybody's mind is, we've been gone for at least 2 months.
Yeah.
What's been going on?
What's been going on?
Did we just quit and felt bad, or what happened?
I think we were just tired. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. What's the answer to that?
I don't know. I was going to ask you.
Oh,
I think we had a few more episodes planned in 2024. Yeah. I think we had 3 episodes left for the rest of the year. I forget what our second to last one was, or our third to last one, but I know we were going to do a year wrap up in a book episode.
Oh, that's right.
As we always have done. Mm-hmm. And then we were going to take our normal break, but I think we were tired, and we were going to rest up and push those to the beginning of the new year.
Oh,
I think that's what the plan was.
Yeah, it looks like here our last our last series, we did a series on the self.
Right. Right.
So 93, 94, 95 were on the self. We ended with the existentialist view. Well, for me, so we're going into December. December is a busy time for both of us. Your semester's winding down. My semester's winding down. Christmas break is coming. I was going out of town. You were going out of town. Like it was just, and I was, honestly, that's kind of running out of gas. We've been hoofing it for a while, and a break was attractive. So intended to come back in January, but January first week of January turned into the second week of January, and
Yeah.
you went back to school. I
I
went
went back
back
to
to school,
school.
and here we are.
Yeah. I think that's the honest answer behind it. So that's probably the best. So I don't know how we get into this, but
Yeah, well, I guess we just get into it. This will be the most. What did I call it earlier? This will be the most. What did I call it? This will be the
the
most
most
whatever episode.
yeah,
Self-indulgent. This will be the
self-indulgent.
most. Yeah, this will be the most self-indulgent episode we've recorded. This is going to be all about us, people, because Andrew and I, we've been doing this for 4 years. 4 years,
4 years
which is a
this
long
month.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
this month, in fact, and we're voluntarily pulling the plug on this thing. We could have just let it drift off out into eternity without some sort of bookend on it. But we
Yeah.
thought for one last hurrah, we would put a bookend on it and talk about a final episode. So this is it. We're done,
Yeah.
people.
This is it. And so we're going to talk a little bit in this episode about the podcast, what we liked, what we didn't, and throw in some things along the way. So this is it. This is not some philosophy of death or with a clever title. This is the intended last episode of the Open Door Philosophy podcast. And yeah, so should we jump in and talk a little bit about? I think our plan for this episode is that we're going to talk about the life cycle of the podcast and then
Mm-hmm.
give a explanation of why we're ending, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we liked and what we didn't. So, should we
Yeah.
talk
Well,
about how the podcast started?
let's talk about how it started. Yeah,
Okay,
4 years ago, in very different circumstances.
4 years ago this very day.
This very day?
I
No,
don't
no, it was in January. Wait, come on. Uh, you had me for a second.
know. That would be cool.
Well, it started on the tail end of COVID is when it started. Andrew was in his little cell of a dorm room at
My monk
University of
cell, yeah.
Rice, and we were beyond quarantine at that point.
Yeah, I remember that you had texted me probably 6 months before we actually started putting the groundwork on the podcast, and we talked about starting one. But it had been, I think that might have been a little bit when we were quarantining more, but I could have the dates wrong. And then I think when we were putting pen to paper, it was when things were ending up out of this COVID
Hmm.
teen mode. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, we're still wearing masks and everything at school. And I want to say things were rather limited on your campus as well. I can't quite remember, but
Right. Yeah,
yeah. So that's
right.
when it began. I think so. So part of the shtick at the beginning, which was I thought a lot of fun. Maybe it wasn't. I think it was. The whole idea was, well, I mean, I want to do a podcast about philosophy because I love philosophy, and I know that Andrew loves philosophy. So it'd be fun if we did a philosophy podcast together. I'm like, aha, here's the angle. A teacher of philosophy and his former student who's now studying philosophy do a podcast together. And there might be some, differences because of our generational experience, our ages. And that was kind of where it started from. It was going to be if anyone listens, like it's a real chore, but if anyone listens to the first episode, Andrew and I were very concerned about,
Yeah.
the quality of life that people were living, how to live a good life. We even kicked around the idea of calling it was it the practical podcast?
The Practical Philosophy Podcast, the Triple P.
Yeah.
I think that
Someone
name
else
had
had
been
that
taken.
title, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
someone else had
right.
that title. So I was like, oh, well, forget that. Anyway, that's kind of how it started. I don't know. What are your reflections on all that?
No, that's right. We'd done quite a bit of planning and thinking about the names and all of this kind of stuff, and it was taken, and we were definitely thinking about that being a practical philosophy podcast, and I think that was a reflection from both of us about. I think a lot of people think correctly that philosophy can be in the academy, very unremoved from or
Mm-hmm.
very removed from daily life, and we saw there was value in applying it to life, and so that's the avenue that we wanted to take.
I think we also wanted to make philosophy accessible to
Yeah,
the non philosopher, or well, non philosopher is not the right word, but anyway, someone who's not in the field of philosophy.
that's
And
right,
I
and
think that's how we started. Like the first couple episodes were sort of like like the foundations or basics of philosophy, right? Wasn't the
right,
second episode Allegory of the Cave?
right, right,
Yeah.
and I think that, and this might be why philosophy is so it can get removed to abstract very quickly is that there's only so much practical philosophy that
Mm.
you can cover. Now, you can mine a lot of practical philosophy in everything. And I think that we did, at least in every episode, at least once, maybe not all of them, but I think that we kept something like that in episodes. They weren't the
Hmm.
focus of all of our episodes, but I think at least once or twice an episode we would continue talking about how can we make this applicable to our lives. But it's tough when we start getting away from philosophers who intended their philosophy to be practical and helping
Yeah.
people live better lives. And I think we moved more into an educational podcast where we put our
Yeah.
second goal of making philosophy accessible. We made that our first goal, and we took on an we took on an educational role.
Did you hear that in the
Yeah,
background?
I don't know
Those
what's
are our
going on.
cats. Those are our cats. I'm like, what's happening out there? You
That's
know,
a
actually, I might leave that in because it was our first or second episode, and like James was meowing in the background.
yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
That's a real throwback, Oh man. But yeah, it kind of became an educational episode. I do think there for a while we tried to it's funny, we tried so many things and we just
Yeah,
they were good ideas initially and then they just kind of faded away.
yeah,
So when we moved into this kind of second phase, I think we did for a while, like at the end of the episode, try to have a practical moment of the
yeah.
of
Right,
what we talked about, like how this is
right.
like actually applicable to everyday life. But then we eventually moved away from that too. And the next kind of evolution was that as we start incorporating a few guests.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Who was our first guest? Was that Gregory Sadler? Or
No,
did
no. So I went back and looked at this morning. It was also a former student of mine,
right,
Carson Knox.
right, 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 right.
He at the time was at the Virginia Military Institute studying Nietzsche, and like that was his focus. He was a Nietzsche scholar, so we had him on for that. He's now in Florida at a private school teaching, which is fantastic.
Wow.
But yeah, he was our first. Then another person that I knew, Jeffrey Howard,
Right, I remember
who
that on
yeah,
transcendentalism, right?
no, close. Pragmatism. So
Pragmatism,
yeah,
right.
so we talked a lot about William James and that movement. And then Sadler came. Sadler was our first guest who was not someone one of us like directly knew.
Yeah,
And you were thrilled. That was a
yeah. I
big
was
deal for
really
you.
happy with that. He. I remember I watched him at school a lot to break down some philosophy, really complicated philosophy bits, and I thought that was really exciting because I think that's what we were trying to do too. And so, yeah, I was really happy to have him on. And I haven't watched him in a while, but I think I looked him up recently, and I think he's still chugging away. I think I don't remember if he's finished his 10-year series breaking down Hegel, but I think he's still chugging away. So best of luck to him.
So on the topic, we can go two different directions here. On the topic
Yeah.
of guests or the topic of the direction of our podcast. So one of the things I think maybe we should have zeroed in on something was to become a bit more than a sort of generalist podcast. Maybe that we had like a particular, you know, angle or whatever. Like say we had a Nietzsche podcast and that was just what we
Yeah.
did. You know,
Yeah.
no, you're saying Sadler 10 years on Hegel. You know, that's
Yeah.
where that's what made me think of it. You know, that's a lot of Hegel. You got to really know Hegel to
Yeah.
do 10 years of Hegel.
Yeah.
You know, in addition to becoming sort of an educationalist podcast, we by extension of that, we became a very generalist podcast. I also think of what is it? Podcast philosophy. It's the real education with no gaps. With no gaps.
Yeah. The history of philosophy with no gaps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
history of philosophy with no gaps. So that's a good example of like focus, right? Like they have an entire series on Indian philosophy. When I say series, I mean like there's like
Yeah.
100
He's
episodes or
he's been
something.
marching through for the past 10 years on Western philosophy. I think he's now in the medieval age. So,
Yeah,
or maybe he. I think he did Descartes actually. So maybe a little past that. But that's a
yeah,
really in-depth
yeah,
philosophy podcast.
yeah. And they did like there may have been a separate series on like
Yeah,
Islamic philosophy.
yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
I
Yeah,
always wondered if we had veered off into a niche area that if people were not just searching for when you do a search for podcasts, you type in philosophy, well, who knows what's going to come up.
right, right.
But if it's someone who wants something like medieval philosophy or Thomist philosophy or something, I don't know, just always the algorithms, the old algorithms,
Yeah,
they're a mystery to us all.
yeah. And I think that's something we can talk about too. I think after our first year, I think our 2022 was, I think, my favorite year looking back on it.
Yeah,
I think we did a lot of good stuff in 2022.
we
I
did.
think I
I'm
think
looking at it right
we
now.
started with Marcus Aurelius, and I think we hit a lot at 22, and that's when I think we laid a really good foundation for our podcast. We were doing a lot of the Stoics. We had a lot of series that year. That was a tough year, I remember, for recording wise, because we were going really in depth. I
Yeah.
think we did several series on things that we knew pretty well. We got Robin Waterfield on that year, and that was a great. That's probably one of my favorite episodes, just content wise, because I knew it so well.
We
And
had
I
some
think
big guests that year. Yeah,
yeah, that's right, that's right. And looking back, I think we put a lot of work in 2022,
we did.
in which we saw the fruits in 2023. I think.
Hmm. We did. We did, in fact. Yeah, we had. I do want to talk about separately a bit about guests here, but we had Jack Symes, Sky Cleary, Robin Waterfield. Those are some pretty big names in the philosophy publishing world,
Yeah,
and I think that was setting us on a particular direction that was successful. And we did have some longer series. We did a 4-part series on Stoicism.
yeah.
That was probably our first 4-part series.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. Then we did. I did. We do a 4-part series on arguments for the existence of God right after. I
that's when
think.
we did that's when we did the philosophy of religion series. Yeah, that was a 4-part series. Yeah, and then we sort of wove guests
Yeah,
in between those particular series. And I
yeah,
think at that point it was kind of like, okay, the idea was, well, you and I will still, do episodes on what we, find interesting and think other people will think is interesting. And we'll, every 3 or 4 episodes we'll have a guest. And so we'd kind of be a combo,
right.
podcast.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
we put a lot of effort in contacting guests and setting up guests. I think we had 5 that year, which might not sound like a lot, but
It was a lot.
it's a lot. It is a lot. But yeah, that was a good year. And at the beginning of 23, we were on the upswing for sure.
Yeah, yeah. We absolutely were, and I think that. Well, I think that's in 24, so I'll say that. But definitely at the beginning of 2023, I think things were looking pretty positive. Not only had we had a successful year in 22, I think we started to have a, what do you call it? Not a brand, but we had a method. We were
Mm-hmm.
gonna, like you say, we had a plan. We had laid a foundation, I think, of our podcast with some cool guests, and so we had some footing going into 2023 that we continued. We were doing
Mm-hmm.
these series. We didn't have as, I don't know if we had a single guest in 2023.
Well, yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But we had, going into 2023, we had a plan.
We had some momentum, man. Like we
Yeah,
had some
we
good
did.
guests.
We
So
did.
2023 is when Taylor Jones joined us on the podcast, which was a fantastic addition to the podcast.
Yeah.
Another former student of mine, but a female. It'd be great to have a female perspective, a female philosopher on the podcast regularly that could give her particular point of view of things. And that was a great addition. Like we were better with Taylor.
Yeah.
The difficulty that came with that is scheduling. Like it's hard enough for you and I to find a day to
Yeah.
record. And you know, when we're talking about like why we're killing the podcast, this is one of them. Life
Yeah.
is busy. And you know, Andrew's in law school now and my life continues to be full of things. Taylor was in school, of course, and still is. And just finding just a single day just to do a regular episode was difficult,
Yeah.
and that was fine. Like we did it in the first 2 years. Andrew, you and I, we always recorded on Sunday morning,
Yeah.
and uh, and
Every
and we
other
needed to
week.
every other week. That's right, and we needed to change it with three of us now, which we knew going in would have to happen. But yeah, we ended up with some really awkward times where we were like, Thursday evening, at 8 p.m. or whatever, and so that was complicated. But then you're right. I don't know that we had a single guest in 2023,
I don't think we did.
and that was really a function of scheduling.
Yeah.
So this is one of the so producing a podcast just takes a lot of energy. There's the recording it, there's the planning it, there's the recording it, there's the editing it, and then you have other things like you got to do some social media and you got to come up with graphics for that social media and et cetera, et cetera. Like there's just a lot to it, and microphones and technology, and do we want to put it on YouTube, and
Right.
should we get transcripts, and should we do a newsletter, and just all of this is a lot for two people who have a busy normal life. And when you throw something like guest into the mix, I did not anticipate how much effort it takes to schedule guests. Sometimes 6 months out,
Yeah.
and so then you got to think about calendars, and you got to make sure that that day's
Prepared
clear, and
too.
that day stays clear. But then you also have to be familiar with what
Yeah.
the guest is going to
Exactly.
talk about.
We'd get their books, and so we'd have to make time to read, which, I mean, is no problem. I mean, but it takes a long time to read a book, and especially a book on philosophy where you have to be familiar with the background. You have to understand the content in the book, which comes part of it, but it adds that additional layer of time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was a worry in 2023, and I think part of our thought too was we were, Taylor's coming in, and so we were getting our footing back again. So we were gonna keep doing our series. We could figure out the scheduling thing. Things would get less busy we figured when we got into our rhythm again. And I
Mm-hmm.
think through that year we got our rhythm maybe, but it was hard to schedule things, and so we were putting off guests until we could kind of get back on flat footing. I think that's my
Yeah.
impression of the year. But that year was also really successful. We did some good series that were extremely popular
Mm-hmm.
on
We did.
did very well. And so I think by the end of that year we thought that we could cut guests because or have less guests because our episodes were doing quite well. We were doing cool things that we'd like to talk about. And Taylor, as you said, she added a great mix of not only perhaps a more feminist perspective, but also existentialist perspective, something she cared a lot about. and
Mhm.
and then it was a lot of fun. So I think the end of 2023 was good.
When I think about what happened in 2023 with how busy all three of us were and how difficult it was to schedule, this is why guests went away. It's that it was easier for the three of us to talk about topics that we were familiar with that didn't really require a lot of
Yeah,
study, if you will, for us, like we would have to study for a guest, because we would never want to have a guest on and
yeah,
us not honor them by not having read their work. I mean, that would be ridiculous. So of course, yeah, I felt more pressure when we had a guest on,
absolutely,
because I didn't want to insult them, for lack of a
absolutely,
better term. I want them to feel
absolutely.
like they had a good experience, whereas if I wasn't as prepared as I should have been for an episode. This is going to sound bad. At worst, I'm letting you down, Andrew. And I would
No,
never want to let you down either.
no, 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 no.
But and I think you too. And we sort of started bouncing around, right?
Yeah,
Like I would do a topic that I knew
right,
really well,
right,
and
right,
that would make the workload on you and Taylor less, and so I would carry
right,
the weight of those episodes, and we would
right.
just kind of rotate that. And that's what happened in 23. It was just too complicated to schedule guests, and it was too and it was too difficult to like schedule when we could all schedule guests and then study up for guests.
There's something. Well, let me preface this, and then I have something to say that's probably new for you too. But I think at the end of 2023, it wasn't a turning point, but it was, and maybe a fork in the road's not to say. Maybe it was a turning point, but I think we our podcast was going the places that we wanted it to go. We were getting a lot of listens. Like I said, we were doing cool things, and so we were very optimistic going into 2024.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of plans, a lot of plans to expand the podcast too. We were going
Yeah.
to introduce more guests back in. We were
Mm-hmm.
very optimistic. Now, something that I didn't say at that time was the end of 2023. I was thinking about departing from the podcast,
Oh, really?
which you might not have known. I don't, but yeah, I was thinking about it because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like my contributions that I could add were decreasing over time. And so that was something that I was thinking about going into 2024.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured I'll give it another year and we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what happens. I thought you and Taylor did a really good job, to be honest. And so that was something I was thinking about going into 2024, but
Hmm.
stuck around.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I me too.
Yeah, Taylor and I did one or two episodes without you. Maybe that's what you're referring to. And let me tell you, there was it was just better with three of us because Taylor and I were like, man, we really need Andrew here. We need Andrew's, to ground us. Taylor and I would just, flit around in the clouds with our silly theories, and we needed some analytical grounding. And that's what you brought, which is great.
No, I think each of us brought our own thing, but
I think so.
it was something I was thinking about. But I think we were optimistic going into 2024. What was your thought going into 2024?
I was optimistic, but I knew that we needed to change something.
Yeah,
Uh, our stats in 23 were constantly going up, and that was great to see. We began to dip in November. November and December is when the decline started as far as listeners, and I couldn't identify a reason why that was. But I was like, okay, well, maybe we need to change some things, and that's when I was like, okay, we need to. I can't remember when we did the newsletter, but like we tried the newsletter, that was too hard to keep up with, and bringing guests back was another thing I wanted to try. I knew we could get Jack Symes because he's a good friend of the podcast, and he had a new book out. So I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be an easy get. We can schedule that one. And then Christian Miller, I knew I'd spoken with him previously, the previous year, about being on the podcast, and I figured he would be open to that. So I was optimistic going into 24, but I knew we needed to turn a corner of some kind. I don't know if I knew it, but I felt like
no,
maybe we
you
did.
yeah
I just didn't know what that corner was. Being that, of course, we need to balance, like there needs to be a balance between like our lives and doing this podcast. And, you know, if we turn a corner per se, uh, then is that thing that we need to do to make the podcast more successful worth the amount of time that we'd have to put into it? Because I
Right.
feel like the three of us were pretty strung out pretty thin at that point.
It was tough. It was tough to get everyone together regularly. I think that was the thing. I also think that that's when we started. We were we were starting to worry. Okay, what is this podcast going to be about?
Right.
We were thinking about our identity of the podcast, and that was a bit of, I think, we are trying to find our ground again.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's only so many things we can talk about.
That's right.
There's only so many things we can talk about well, at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that was, I think, constantly in our mind. 2024, we started with some episodes on beauty, women, and philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look at our episodes and our podcast, it's clear that we were shotgunning around. I think our plan, we would, which
Yeah.
is not necessarily bad, but we kind of had left our series. We did do series, but they weren't super connected to each other.
Yes. Yeah, they were very different from each other. And we did some series that we had been wanting to do. Like we'd been wanting to do the
Yeah.
Oxford Four for a couple of years,
Yep.
you know, and
Absolutely.
we did, and women in philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you know, well, I guess those two are connected. But then we like threw in religious experience in between all of
Yeah.
those, and
Yeah.
that was kind of an
Yeah.
awkward fit.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
than those other topics.
Yeah.
We had two guests on. We had Jack Symes on again, and that was wonderful. And then we had Christian
Shout
Miller.
out to
Christian
Jack.
Miller was a great guest as well.
Yeah. I
I
loved.
think you particularly enjoyed that
Yeah, I
conversation.
really liked Christian Miller. I thought he was really good at doing our goal from the beginning. I thought he made philosophy very practical, and I agreed with a lot of what he had to say. So I enjoyed that. Jack, I've always enjoyed talking to Jack, and it was great to have him back on the
Yeah.
podcast. He's a great guest. I really, really always liked him. So I was glad to have him back.
Yeah, and you know what's funny with Jack? It was when we first encountered Jack. I guess we'll do our little Jack moment here. When we first encountered Jack, like in our very early in our second year, he was on him and his podcast was on the rise in terms of popularity. And now, like Jack Symes is quite well known.
Yeah.
In the 3.5 years since that first time we interviewed him, you know, to the second time we interviewed him, you know, he was, I mean, of course, still same wonderful Jack, but, you know, his production quality had gone up, you know, his professionalism had gone up. And like, that's absolutely wonderful. It's just funny trying to think of like the trajectories of
Yeah.
like his rise and our project as well,
Yeah.
and how those both changed. And like now, Jack Simon, and great for Jack. He's really quite
Yeah.
well
Of
known,
course.
and
I
doing
didn't know. I
fantastic,
just looked. Yeah.
things.
I before this podcast, I was wondering what he was up to, and I looked him up, and I saw he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is, whatever your review is, I think that's probably the number one just listened to podcast in the world.
Yeah,
So, that's amazing. Nothing but good things to say about him.
absolutely. And his passion is like public philosophy. So
Yeah,
this
right.
is really great for him. And let me just say, as a special thanks, we had lots of wonderful guests. Jack Symes was always very kind to us when
Yeah,
there was not necessarily any reason to be, I would say, like overly kind to us and generous.
yeah,
He was
absolutely.
always rooting us on. We once had a Zoom with him very early in the morning here, but late in the afternoon in England, you know, with him specifically about, you know, podcasts and helping us out with ideas and maybe some things with technology and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You know, he made time for all of that, and he certainly has plenty of things going on,
yeah, absolutely,
unquestionably. So, just a big
absolutely.
thanks to Jack Symes. Just a really good person.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
hats off to Jack. Thanks, Jack. What was your favorite interview, Andrew?
Well, I think that I always enjoyed talking to Jack. I really liked him, so he's definitely up there. I also really enjoyed speaking with Robin Waterfield. I think that he was just I don't even know what to say about him. I think he's the most I don't know the word I'm looking for here. He knew the subject so incredibly well and was
Mm-hmm.
so precise with his knowledge. That was just incredible, and I always appreciate talking to people who know so much and who have taken the time to become experts in their field. That was really awesome. We had so many technology issues on that episode. It
We did.
was scary. I mean,
Yeah.
I was,
Is that the one that we hopped over to
yep,
Zoom
yep,
to
yep,
record? Oh my
yep,
gosh. And
yep.
like I don't know, something went wrong on mine.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
don't
your
know if it was.
audio, he couldn't hear your audio or,
That's right. That's right. Huh. Yeah, that was a mess. And he was
uh,
in southern Greece. Like he
yep,
said, a very remote place in southern
yep,
Greece. So, technology issues could certainly be on his end as well.
yep,
For me, he was very, I mean, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
yeah,
Probably might be my favorite in a different way. I don't know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like my
yeah.
favorites are favorites in different ways. He was very intimidating for me
Yes, yes, same.
because he was so knowledgeable. My
Yep,
goodness.
yep.
And he wasn't like trying to be
No,
intimidating.
no.
He just was, but it's fabulous to talk to. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I would just love to just talk with him,
yep.
just have coffee and just talk with the guy.
He was an expert, I think, in the fullest sense of that term, and
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible when you get to talk to someone like that and who is willing to give you their time. I mean, the guy spends a lot of time with Plato and Aristotle, just going very slowly through their work and
Mm-hmm.
translating word by word, not to lose the meaning. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Jack was wonderful. We've talked about him already. And so those are probably my top two. What about
Yeah.
you?
Those are probably my top two as well. Another one I was very excited about and still enjoyed it so much was Sky Cleary, who was also very, very kind to us.
She was nice. Yeah.
Yes, and she also, I can't remember if I told you this or not. Taylor was not on the podcast at that point, but of course I
Yeah.
had maintained contact with her, and something we did her senior year was do quite a long series on women in philosophy, and so I knew that Taylor really enjoyed Simone de Beauvoir. And this is what Sky Cleary's book was about. So I asked her if she would sign a copy for Taylor and address it
Oh,
to
I didn't
Taylor.
know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I asked her
Wow.
if she would, sign a copy and address it to Taylor, and she did, and she mailed it to me, and I was able to give
Wow.
it to Taylor. So that was a real thrill. And Sky is just someone who's well known in publishing philosophy, and so that was really a great one to have
Yeah.
on. And that episode was just a couple weeks after. Oh, forgive me. What was the case that overturned Roe versus Wade?
Dobbs.
Dobbs, yeah. Dobbs had just passed. And of course, Simone de Beauvoir was such an advocate for women's health and that particular movement. And Sky was noticeably agitated about. She gave quite if people are interested in that, you should go back and listen. She gave quite an impassioned speech at some point, after which she even apologized for being so intense about it. I don't know if it came off as that intense, but she was very passionate about it. And so to hear that passion, actually, philosophy can often be, uh, the conception of philosophy, is this sort of armchair, very rational, cool headed, sort of analytical view of things. And to hear passion injected into philosophy is something that's nice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, those
Absolutely.
are some of my favorites. One of my memories about the most, I guess, embarrassing. We had this guest,
Peg O'Connor. Yeah. Yeah.
Peg
Peg
O'Connor,
O'Connor.
and I had the flu
Yeah.
that particular episode, and I was just not there. Like my head was so foggy, and
Yeah.
twice in the episode, not just once but twice, I was trying to formulate like something to say, a question to respond to something she said, and all this sort of stuff. And like mid thought, mid sentence, it just left me, and I was so embarrassed. She was great, she just picked
She's
it
very
right up,
kind.
and yeah, she was great. She picked it right up and kept going, and you supported me in that as well, Andrew. I remember helping me out, but
That
goodness,
was impressive.
I felt so ridiculous.
No, no, that
Because she's a
was,
guest, if that
yeah.
happened with you and me, I'd be like, Andrew loves me. It's all good. But anyway,
No, that was a fun moment. Probably not for you in the moment, but that's just how it happens with guests, and
it
that's a
is. It is.
repetitive theme. What's another awkward moment? Well, I remember. I think the first. I remember at one point. I forget your friend's name. I think we had a disagreement on some philosophy when he came on. That was an interesting moment. I forget what his name
Carson
was. No,
or
no, no, not Carson. The second guest we had on,
Jeffrey Howard.
Jeffrey
Yeah.
Howard. Yeah, I remember that, but I think I kept it in until the next episode.
You kept it in. I'll
I
have
think
to listen to that next
I
episode. Did
don't.
you did you go off or something? I can't
I don't
remember.
think I went off. No, I think I just disagreed, which is great. I mean, that's kind of the point of all of us.
Yeah. And then back to 2024, we had so we tried to bring guests back. Actually, I guess we did bring guests back. We had two. They were great interviews. I was very
Yeah,
excited about both Symes and Miller. It was in that spring semester when things really just got really difficult to schedule with all three of us, and then trying to schedule guests made it just worse. I really felt like I was pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. I felt like I was really just pushing us, like a breaking point was coming,
yeah,
because it was so hard. It's hard enough to schedule three of us, but when you consider a guest where you want to be able to communicate with them in enough time to, have them clear their schedules it was just difficult. And we had another guest lined up for that spring, Philip Goff, which was a real big get. I was excited about that. And then something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we had to reschedule that all the way to October.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
And then the rest of 24 we just kind of saw out. It seemed like by the time we got to October, when we would have actually, that was late October, so really almost November, when we would have had Philip on, that things had just changed, and it didn't feel right. I don't know if I want to like be prophetic and say like, this thing is winding down. This thing called Open Door Philosophy is kind of the watch is kind of winding down, and he would have been a fantastic guest. But by for the second half of 2024, I mean, numbers were down, and we were doing series. Man, it was a struggle for me. I don't know if it was for you, but it was a struggle for me to get ready to do
Yeah,
whatever it was that we were going to do. That's when we did the Oxford Four. Yeah, I was just feeling the I was just feeling the fatigue. I was feeling the fatigue. Anyway, that's kind of how 2024 went. It started off very optimistically and really tapered off, and we saw that reflected in our numbers as well.
yeah. I think it was hard around the summertime. We were.
Yes, it
It
was.
was it was tough, and we were. I think we were trying to cut the fat off of the or whatever, throw the extra weight off the ship in order to to keep going. Maybe that sounds bad. Let me
No, I think
rephrase
that's
that.
exactly right. Like, think of
Okay,
the things we tossed off, right? Like, we tried newsletters.
right,
We just
right,
couldn't keep up with it. We tried reintroducing guests. We couldn't keep up with it. I was like trying to figure out how to do transcripts, because that would
right. I forgot about
improve,
that.
our search engine optimization.
Right,
You were trying to do videos on YouTube.
right,
Like,
right.
all of us were pushing to try to do something, and we couldn't keep up with any of it because it was just too much.
Yeah,
And like, I understand why podcast shows have producers and stuff
yeah.
to do all
Absolutely.
these things. And so you're right. I think thing by thing, we just shoveled it off because we couldn't keep up with it. And really, what we were left with was just us, which is great.
Yeah,
But as far as like turning a corner and trying to do something new, all those efforts they didn't fail. It's just we didn't have time to do them
Yeah,
well
exactly.
or
Exactly.
consistently.
And so I think that brings us here, which is we I don't know what to say. I think we
Viking funeral.
I think that we don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
We could do more things. We could probably do them well. A few of them well. When we were brainstorming about should we stop this, we could pivot into a philosophy of religion podcast, or we could probably do a stoic podcast, but that's not what we are at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're a practical philosophy in an idea, and a more generalist podcast. And so doing something like that, it's like my old ice cube example. If you take the property of coldness away from the ice cube, it's not an ice cube anymore.
Yeah.
And so rather than, as you alluded to at the beginning, it just going off in some direction like that, or trying to just, bite the bit or bite the bullet and keep doing some random series that we know less and less about, we are going to stop now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Bye, everyone. See you later. No, but seriously, like we could have let this thing just like
Yeah.
episode, what was it, 95, just be our last episode and no final word be said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is good. This is good to review all this stuff. And
Yeah.
So that's it, folks.
Yeah.
So we're done. Peace out. Let me just get real, classic Parsons emotional here for a moment.
Please.
And say, doing this with you, Andrew, the last 4 years has been an absolute pleasure and a real benefit and bonus to my life. Yeah. And one of the things I'd always sort of feared is, if we ended this podcast, your and my relationship, we just naturally wouldn't talk with each other as often. And relationships require contact. It just does. And so you would never want to keep doing a podcast to be a vehicle to maintain a relationship with you. That seems silly.
Yeah.
Although, plenty of people do all kinds of things similar in a different way to maintain relationships. I feel with full assurance that I do not need open door philosophy to maintain a friendship with you.
Yeah.
So that's not a worry anymore. And it has been absolutely wonderful to engage with you in the way that we do. And walking away from this 4 years later, you're a former student of mine that I had some contact with. We know each other so well now. Yeah. You're unquestionably a friend.
Yeah.
And the list of those types of people in my life is pretty short. And and it's wonderful that I have you in that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love you, Andrew.
Thanks. Well, I don't know if I've ever been the emotional one on the podcast, but I feel the exact same. It's been an honor. It really has. And thank you for wanting me in your life and for doing this with me.
Yeah.
It's been a great journey, and I'm happy with what we've done. I'm more than pleased with our friendship too. I'm even above what we've done with the podcast, and it's been great. It's been great, and thank you again. Yeah, I really do thank you. So thank you, thank you, and it's been great.
Yeah. And as long as we're thanking, we'd like to thank all of our listeners for listening over the years. To be honest, everyone, like at the beginning of this, I drew a lot of, and maybe you too, Andrew, I drew a lot of pleasure and satisfaction out of just doing this. Like it's fun to learn new things. Yeah. It's fun to learn how to do things, like make a podcast and all of that stuff. Like that's fun in building things and be able to talk about what we mutually enjoy, this discipline called philosophy. But another thing is that listeners and comments from listeners, interaction with listeners really fills the bucket for me. And so, thank you for everyone who ever engaged with, even if you listen to just one episode. Thank you so much for engaging with our content.
Yeah, I agree. It's been amazing to know that people have been listening. It's been very special to get emails from listeners too. We've got I know several times it's been incredibly motivating. I mean, I think all the times, even when we got some comments from people who said they disagreed with us or whatever, it still meant a lot to hear that people were engaging with our ideas and our thoughts, and that was extremely special.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few emails that come to mind that just were very special and nice, and so thanks for everyone who wrote in. It meant it was incredibly meaningful to me, and I think also to you as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so thank you for that.
I guess on some housekeeping types of things, if anyone's made it this far in the episode, email. We have killed the contact at opendoorphilosophy.com email. The email that we'll be using for the near future, the foreseeable future, will be opendoorphilosophy@gmail.com. That was what we had previously, so we'll go back to using that. We'll change it on the website. We will keep this podcast active on wherever you listen to podcasts. So these episodes will stay up. They're not going anywhere. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, I mean, we do have that Instagram.
We have an Instagram. Feel free to send a message there.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can contact us through that. I'll occasionally throw something out there just to see what happens, if anyone's paying any attention.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you can contact us through that. Let's see. Anything else? I feel like we're naturally wrapping this up.
Yeah, I do too. Well, what will you miss and what won't you miss? And let's call it a day.
Oh, what will I miss and what won't I miss? Okay, good. Do you want to go first? I feel like you're interviewing me.
Oh, what will I miss the most? I think number one, and this might be reflective of something too, is I think I'll miss getting on here with you on the weekends and doing this. That's going to be my number one biggest miss, and that might mean something too. I think that's kind of the point. I think the energy has run out on that, and so we're reverting to our friendship to keep it alive, which is great, but it's using the podcast as a means to an end. So the podcast is not going to be what it's for. So that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, along with that, that's the biggest thing. I'd say that's probably 90%. Looking into philosophy is cool. Talking about philosophy goes with the first. Interviewing cool guests is up there. And what else? Yeah, I think hearing from listeners was great too. So those are probably the three big things that I'll miss the most. What about you?
Yeah, not too unlike your answers. Those first 2 years when we recorded regularly on Sunday mornings, that just kind of became my Sunday morning, and it was something I really looked forward to.
Yeah, same.
And you're the person in my life that knows most about philosophy.
Yeah, ditto.
And
ditto.
It's a small little pond to swim in because there's not a lot of fish in it. That's a silly analogy. So you're the person I can talk to about philosophy, and
Yep.
And you can speak the same language per se.
Yep.
So anyway,
Absolutely.
that's something that won't go away, of course. Doing it in this particular fashion with microphones and all that stuff will change, but
the quality.
So I always enjoyed Sunday mornings. It was nice.
Same.
Enjoyed our little catch-ups at the beginning of each episode, talking about the weather.
Same.
Or me mowing the lawn or whatever. That was fun. Guest is a mixed bag for me. I love talking to the guests, but man, setting it up and preparing, I will not miss.
Yeah.
Not miss. That was always very stressful for me. So I don't miss that. I will not miss the tech issues. Man, over the years.
Yes.
I mean, all kinds
every
of things,
time.
Your
every
headphones
time.
die, or once or twice I had to dash out of the room and run to the garage and grab an extension cord because laptop battery was dying. The tech issues with Robin Waterfield was a nightmare.
The worst.
So I won't miss, and I can't. Oh, you know what I won't miss? Editing. I will not miss editing. At the
Yeah.
beginning, it was kind of fun, but oh boy, it really became a labor. And the thing I really learned is that you and I say a lot.
Yes. Yes. All the time.
All the
All the time.
time. There, I just did it. Well, and. We also say, a lot. So
The
I thought
one that
about,
I didn't notice that we've done, although
uh-huh.
we might have done it earlier, but I do not like when podcasters say it, is the word right. And I think I
Mm.
used to do that more. Maybe I still do. I don't know. But it grinds my gears like nobody's business when I hear it.
Like when they end a sentence with it or something. Like,
Yeah. Like,
uh, yeah.
we all know that donuts are the best thing in the world, right? It's
Right,
like, no,
right. Yeah.
I don't know.
I do that when I get fired up about a topic, and I'm just really riffing.
I don't know. I've never
I,
noticed it
I,
with
I
you. So,
notice that I do it sometimes. Yeah. And honestly, like certain phrases like, or I mean, I just said one a second ago. I can't even remember what it was, but these kind of like vague statements,
right.
that come
I just,
after, like you don't know what
uh,
else to say. So you just say,
yeah.
and so and such, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
another one, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, some of those statements. Yeah, it did make me more aware of the language that I use and how I could become more precise
Yeah.
uh, with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I think we both became better at speaking. I'll say that.
I hope so.
So, yeah, it's going to kind of become your career.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So those are the things that kind of drove me. Did you say things that drove you nuts, or that you won't miss?
it's the same. One last question I have, and this is
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah.
What's the future? What's the future for us?
Oh,
Should we say?
should we say? As in, like, do we have a plan? Is that a setup?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What's going to go on? If people want to stay in touch with us, how can they do that?
The other thing that's really funny that I think about is my journey with what is now called the social media X.
Yeah. Right. That has changed a lot for you.
Yeah. I had a real.
Yeah.
I
You had a
don't. I don't know how.
presence.
I don't know
You
how
had
to
a
discuss
presence.
how to say it, but yeah, I had it going on with philosophy Twitter,
Yeah, you did.
and about it probably less than a year ago. I don't know how long it was. I just couldn't take it anymore, and after Elon bought that thing, and it became what it is now, it's just like, yeah, I don't want to be on this. And I tried, and then I was like, do I rebuild over on Threads or Blue Sky or something? That just sounded exhausting. And then I just got to this point where, honestly, with all social media, I just got tired of representing myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense. It
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
exhausting to
Yeah.
try to be something to the world
Yeah.
in this sort of
Yeah.
fabricated way. So I can't remember what got me on that topic, but something about how can people find me. I'm on Instagram. That's really the only thing I check anymore. And I don't really do anything on it. I think the last post I made was about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Uh, so what's next? I don't know. Like, I will eventually retire from teaching. That will happen within the next 10 years.
Yeah.
It could be as early as, 4 years from now, but
Or this year?
huh?
No.
No, not this year.
Just
Not
kidding.
this year. I still need the income. But I love teaching, and I don't want to stop doing that. I might feel differently a year or two from now or three, but I love philosophy and I love teaching, and I don't want to stop doing that. And so I don't know what's next, as far as that goes. I don't know. Maybe I go back to school and get another degree of some variety. I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is I love my life. I have a wonderful life,
Yeah, you do.
and I'm so happy for it. With all the things in my life, my Kirsten and I have a wonderful life, wonderful
Yeah.
children, grandchildren. Everything's very good. So yeah, I don't know. What's next for you?
The plan right now is to move back to Houston after school. I an internship this summer. I don't think I told you about that, but
I remember you're
an
interviewing for
internship
it.
this
Yeah.
summer in
Did you? So
Houston.
you got it?
I did get it. I did.
Excellent.
So
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. And so I'll be back in Houston, presumably doing legal things, but I don't know if that's the plan for life.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I'm not on. I think I've been a hater of social media since the beginning, but
I was going to
uh,
say, you've never been on social media.
Yeah, yeah, and that might
But
have been a problem too that we could
you
have
had a
talked about.
book.
But
You had a book social media for a hot minute.
yeah,
You
yeah,
posted
yeah,
lots of things about books you were reading.
yeah, yeah. Well, people can find me on LinkedIn. I actually don't have it right now. I turn it off. I turned it off when I got my internship, but
Mm.
I will reopen it if people want to connect with me. And I guess you can send me messages there. I think the if you just look up Andrew Graziano Duke Law, you'll find me. Or I think my profile is Andrew T Graziano. So you can find me there. I'll open that back up for people if they want to connect, and yeah, love to connect more.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting here. We used to give out all of our socials at the beginning when we started these episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, I'll follow up. Yeah, so Instagram is so embarrassing. The Instagram is the Parsonage, P A
oh,
R
that's a
S
good
O N
one.
A
I
G
like it.
E. It sounds like I'm being arrogant. I'm like the Parsons, but no, a parsonage is a particular house associated with members of the Anglican clergy. A parson
I
lives in
didn't know
pars-
that. That's
lives in a
awesome.
parsonage. Oh, really? You didn't know that? Yeah.
Nope, I did not
Yeah,
know that.
there's usually a house. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but back in the day, there was always a house nearby like usually on the property of the church, and that was called the parsonage.
Really,
Uh,
I did not
yeah,
know that.
yeah.
Wow.
So that's my Instagram, the parsonage. And yeah, if you really want to get a hold of me, guys, I mean, you can use opendoorphilosophy at gmail.com. But well, one last thing, Andrew. You know, we've always said at the end of every single episode, which really goes back to our like practical philosophy roots.
Yeah.
We never got rid of the tagline when we got rid of so many other things slowly over the years. When your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Andrew, what happens to the door?
Well, I was wondering about this, and I feel bad that you're making me say it because I think your answer's so great. But the on the other side of the door, at the end of the day, it's not us. And it's
Right.
not me, it's not Parsons, it's not Taylor, it's philosophy. The door's always open for you to come in with us, although we won't be here on this podcast, to the world of philosophy. That's always going to be open. That's never going to leave. The podcast is never going to end there. We encourage everyone still to do that. So when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door's always open. It's staying open.
That's right. It is always open. Yeah, Andrew and I have always very fervently felt that philosophy is something that can improve people's lives,
Yep,
and that's why we
that's
started
right.
this thing to begin with. So yeah, that's not going anywhere. All those great, wonderful words written by so many very thoughtful people will still be
Yeah,
around, and there's lots of
absolutely.
places to access that, whether that's people on YouTube or other podcasts, or God forbid, a book or something, or professors, at universities or whatever. Like it's out there everywhere. You can
Yeah.
find it.
One thing people always tell me when I say that you study philosophy or you like to read it is, I always thought that was cool, but I never could get into it. Or I always
Mm.
wanted to take a class on that and I never did. Just do it. Just
Yeah,
do
just
it.
do it. In
Just
fact,
do it.
we have an episode on where to start with
Right.
philosophy somewhere in our catalog.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. It is a good question. Like if your first and only exposures, like you go to Barnes and Nobles and you pick up, I don't know, Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche, you'll probably never pick up another
No.
philosophy book again because you'll
No.
be like, what the hell am I reading?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
knowing
Don't
where to
do that.
start is
Don't
kind
do
of
that.
important. Yeah,
Don't
don't
do
just
that.
pick up Immanuel Kant and Critique of Pure Reason. I mean,
Never.
you won't get
I
past the
tried
fourth
to do
page.
that and it failed.
Um, it's miserable. Yeah.
It's
Don't,
awful.
don't read any Enlightenment era philosophers.
Yeah.
That's not true. But anyway,
Ah,
it is my least favorite period of philosophy to read. I'll say that. Ugh, man, very important ideas,
yeah.
but oof, got to work for them. Yeah, and I guess the last thing, the door, if we're talking about this door, this metaphor, this door on Andrew and I, doing something Andrew and I are both very interested in religion, whether that's philosophy of religion or comparative religion or whatever. Who knows? Maybe one day that door cracks back open, and Andrew and
Yeah.
I do some other joint effort together. Might involve that,
I would be
might not.
interested. That's all I'll
I
say.
would be interested too, but let's let it. Let's give it
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Yes. Fun little story, since this is the most indulgent episode we'll ever make. Every time I go to Oklahoma to visit my parents, there's this restaurant we go to, and I
Yeah.
don't know why they have this in the front of the restaurant, but there's a couple of like periodical magazines type things that you can pick up for free. There's something called the Eastern Oklahoman Catholic.
Nice.
It's like a monthly publication. Every time I go up there, I grab one for Andrew.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I think you have a few for me.
I have a few here that I forgot to give you over Christmas. I saw you like
Yeah.
twice or something, but I forgot to give it to you. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
I think we'd say that's a shared passion of ours outside of
Yeah,
philosophy.
absolutely.
Religion is
Absolutely.
fascinating to me. Anyway,
Absolutely.
okay. Well, I guess that's it.
That's
Is
it.
that it?
That's all.
That's it. Well, we usually have a spiel like, oh, check us out
Thanks,
on
Kevin MacLeod. Yeah.
Wait, yes, Kevin MacLeod. Y'all, this guy. Never met him, never even talked to him. His music is everywhere out there. He has it for free.
Yeah.
You can use it for free, and that's exactly what we
Yeah.
did. So thank you, Kevin MacLeod, for letting us use your music for
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I don't know where we would have gotten music from. We probably recorded something. You could have played the cello. Wait, was it the cello you played?
Play the violin. Yeah.
Violin. You could have
Very cool.
recorded a little violin opening.
Yeah.
So thanks, Kevin MacLeod.
Oh,
We're
thanks.
used to your free music.
Wow.
I think Andrew used to say it's so groovy.
That's groovy.
You're probably listening to it right now. We'll see if I add it in the editing. Oh man. Well, I guess that's it, my friend.
That's it. This was
Okay.
good.
Well, you always say it, so I guess say it.
All right. When your life. Thanks everybody for listening. I still can't do it 4 years later. Thanks everybody for listening. We always appreciate it. Send us an email. It's been great. Thank you, Parsons. So it's been good.
Thank you, Andrew.
I guess this is it for all, for here and evermore. Just remember, when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Peace.
All right. See you later.